Hello, Packers fans, and welcome into PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined by Tom Silverstein here on this fine, quiet Friday. I probably should knock on wood because now I've jinxed it. But it's been a relatively quiet spoon for here for the past week or so as we gear up towards the draft. Is that sort of common for this time of year? And how is this offseason sort of going so far now that Aaron Rodgers, Devante Adams, all that news has settled down?
Well, it was about time the offseason settled down because it was pretty much a whirlwind for,
Right.
8 weeks, something like that, or at least that. And it was just
Yeah.
nonstop every day, something new. And the free agency periods pretty much dried up. And, most of the teams are on to the draft now. And really, we're only 3 weeks away as of Thursday. So it's getting near. I don't think deals are necessarily done. I think there will be more things going on as we head into the draft. I think you'll see some maybe player for draft pick trades and maybe some more pick trades going on too. I think there'll be some activity as we get closer to the draft.
So you're saying that with the extra draft capital the Packers have now from the Raiders, you wouldn't be surprised if they were trading, or do you just mean kind of in general, all the teams, more of like what we saw with the Saints?
I think in general, I think we'll see, some teams just decide that heading into the draft that they want either more picks or they're not going to be able to get a deal done with somebody and they're going to make a trade. People kind of want to know where they stand going into the draft. And so at some point, if you're not getting anywhere, you're seeing where, San Francisco is having an issue with Deebo Samuel now, where he scrubbed his Instagram. That seems to be the new thing, to scrub your Instagram if you're ticked off about your contract.
It's the passive-aggressive way to get NFL contracts done.
Yeah. I mean, DK Metcalf, we still don't know if anything's going to happen there. We saw Brandon Cooks re-signed with Houston.
Texans.
So I think it's just going to be a matter of, do deal makers, do they come up with deals? And I think there will be activity before we get to the draft.
That kind of leads into Heidi's question. Do you think the Packers are just waiting for the draft to get a wide receiver?
No, I think they're exploring. I think they're probably exploring every possibility, and they're checking to see what the cost is and, whether they could be involved. I'd be kind of surprised if they made a big splash like the Metcalf or Samuel. I think they are going to have to prepare for the future with these wide receivers. That's their number one need. And some of these, it helps them more to have some guys on rookie contracts than it does to have another guy on a blockbuster. Now we'll see if the compensation is right, but so far we haven't really heard anything with Seattle. Maybe closer to the draft, they'll decide they want draft capital and they're ready to trade him. But as of now, doesn't seem to be anything going on.
Watch that be like a 6:45 draft night trade.
Oh, it would probably happen the week of the draft. I don't know if it'll happen day of the draft, but on that week heading into the draft could be really interesting.
Do you have a draft day tradition like I do of watching the Kevin Costner movie the last 5 years or so?
No. I finally watched it for the first time a month ago or something
Really?
like that. Yeah. Someone was telling me, "Oh, you need to watch it."
Yeah. I mean, it's not fine cinema, but it's cool because the NFL was like so involved in it. So they let them have full access to all these, NFL facilities and ideas. And so it's a cool behind the scenes look. And it's good to have jokes for draft night when you have quotes for the movie. Let's kind of talk about the draft real quick before we get into some of these other questions about tight ends and such. Callum asked, do you think Chris Olave will be a good replacement for Devante Adams in the draft? I think he could be a really good player for us. Before you answer this question, Spoon, I want to add, Brian Gutekunst was at Chris Olave's pro day. However, our colleague Pete Doherty has this saying that wherever they are, look elsewhere. Is that track, or should we be looking closer at Chris Olave?
Yeah. So Brian Gutekunst goes to the biggest pro days generally. He goes to the Ohio States. He goes to Oklahoma's. He tries to make it to the areas where he can see the most draft-worthy people. I'll bet. I don't know about Georgia, but
I was about to say, like, Georgia would be a great one this year.
Yeah, I don't know if he went to that one, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did. So sometimes he just picks up where they haven't necessarily gotten their scout to enough, or maybe their scout is really high on someone and they want him to go look at him. But yeah, I never read anything into, unless he shows up at Winthrop's, pro day, then, I wouldn't read anything into that at all.
Ray says that Olave would not be there at 22 or 29. You would have to trade up to get Olave. I think that's fair to say.
Maybe.
I think one person we've talked about here and there is someone who could be sitting there at 22, possibly even 29, is Jameson Williamson from Alabama, purely because of the torn ACL. But, and you're not going to be able to have him until the playoffs. But then you ask yourself, if you're in a small championship window, is it worth taking someone in the first round that you're not going to have until January?
Well, you don't like to collect guys who have ACLs. And the Packers have Bakhtiari coming off an ACL, Elton Jenkins, Robert Tonyan, very key players. I could see if you have an extra pick and you're thinking about the future, then you could think about Jameson Williams. But, that I guess I could see them doing it if the guy just falls too far. But I also think that there's going to be some team that isn't a playoff team that's going to say, hey, what the heck? We're not playing for this year. Let's grab this guy because he's going to be really good in 2 years.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Robert Tonyan, and I know it was about the ACL, but let's jump to tight ends for a minute. Jeff Jacobs asked, are there any tight end options out there? And then Rich asked about tight ends as well. But let's first look, are there really any tight end options still out there on the free agent market, or is that one as well that we feel like they're going to have to pick somebody up in the draft? And it should be noted that Brian Gutekunst seems very high on Robert Tonyan's progress so far and his rehab.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be a big position of need. They do feel really good about Tonyan and his return. They have DeGuara, who I think will be better a year after his ACL injury. Mercedes Lewis is on the roster right now. Dominique Daphne is still around. I tend to be less in the camp that they're going to go with a tight end somewhere. I think they could possibly wind up with, a journeyman guy to complement DeGuara and Tonyan. But, Tonyan's their guy, and that's the guy they got to get on the field more than anything. I don't know that they can draft a guy who can give them what Tonyan can right away. It's a tough position to play in the NFL. And, unless you're a top pick, and even then, the TJ Hawkinsons and the kid in Atlanta, they've had
Kyle Pitts.
They had decent rookie years, but I wouldn't necessarily call them difference makers, like the guys who took their teams to the playoffs or anything. So I think I think wide receivers remains number one, and then I think they need to continue to build that defense because I think they're going to be winning with defense if they do win this year.
Let's say they do get Robert Tonyan back on the field soon. Rich asks, could we see the tight ends downfield more often this season?
Oh, it depends. It would have to be Tonyan because I don't know that any of the others, DeGuara maybe could start to develop there. But, Tanyan's the only one they have who's a traditional down the field guy.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they find somebody, in the draft that they like, kind of a prospect or a project, I mean. But those guys don't necessarily, well, they used to grow on trees. The Packers took one, they thought they were getting a good one in Jay Sternberger. I mean, great numbers, and it didn't pan out. And so it's not like there's a lot of those guys in college, but a lot of them don't pan out in the NFL because eventually they have to block and they have to be more than just glorified wide receivers.
Mm-hmm. Also, before we move on to the next question, shout out to Dan. Hello from Sweden. Thanks for tuning in to us. What time is it in Sweden right now? I would say, well, probably 9:40? I don't know. My time zone math is off. Are you going to be impressed if I'm right?
Huh?
Are you going to be impressed if I'm right?
No, not really.
Let's look up at the O-line. There have been several comments put in about the O-line, and I'm going to jump to this one right here from Ray. Wait, where did it go? Sorry, Ray. Here we go. With 69 and 74 in their ACLs and a lack of experience in Yash, I could see a pick at O-tackle in the first round. Then, as they always do, take a wide receiver later. A lot of mock drafts have a tackle coming to the Packers at 22. Is that more of a position of need, in your opinion, than wide receiver?
I think it's a position where if the right guy falls to them there, then why not? If you could get a guy that you think can plug in at right tackle and play right away, then absolutely I would. If I were them, I would do that because as we know, you got to have flexibility. And even though you have a guy in Yash Nyman who you think you could play right tackle, you don't know how long David Bakhtiari is going to be around. Anything could happen. And so you just can't have too many tackles. It's probably, there are probably some pretty decent linemen in the second round that you could get. So I don't think you have to really stretch to get a offensive lineman. I mean, I'll know more about this, still kind of feeling the draft out. But if you're just talking about from the position standpoint, absolutely, they could take a tackle there.
The tackle that has been sort of drafted to the Packers here and there is Luke Gadecki from Central Michigan. So, will he still be there? We don't know. The Trevor Pena guy is not going to still be there. Neal from Alabama is not going to still be there. But if Gadecki is still there in the 20s, maybe we do see them reach for him.
That's a little bit of probably a stretch. I mean, his teammate, Bernard Ryman, is probably a higher prospect. He's really athletic and large. Gadecki's probably underrated, but someone could. I know at least one scout who thought that he was better than Raymond. So that will be kind of interesting. But his teammate is the higher thought of at this point.
Mm-hmm. We're going to take one last question here. And don't worry, guys, we'll be back next week if you have more. I know we didn't get to talk a lot about defense today. But this is a good question from Heidi as we're getting closer and closer to the draft. Do you think Rodgers is having a say in what is going on? And that applies to free agency as well. And we know that was something he wanted. And he stated that very clearly last year. He wants more of a say in what's going on. Do you think his voice is being heard more this offseason?
Not really. I don't think there's been an instance where they've really needed his input. I'm sure, he was consulted or at least informed about Devante Adams and what was going on there. But what was he going to do there? I mean, there just wasn't really anything he could do, I think.
Instead of, sorry, what am I trying to say? Other than trying to talk Devante into staying,
right,
which it didn't seem like was going to happen.
Right, and I just think that Devante Adams was ready to move on, and he wanted to go play with his buddy.
Yeah.
So, from that standpoint, I mean, they haven't done anything else offensively, so I don't really see where they would have talked to Rodgers. I doubt they'll talk to him about the draft because, I mean, that's a science you have to study, and he doesn't spend his time studying the draft. So I kind of doubt that. Now, if they are considering a deal for a wide receiver, maybe someone's on the block. Who knows? Maybe they asked them about Devontae Parker or someone who's been on the block and got traded. Could this guy work with you? They might have asked him about something like that. But I think that's the extent of it is, okay, could you play with this guy? What are your thoughts on this guy? And they haven't been involved in that many offensive guys yet.
With that being said, I know a couple of people also asked about Ryan Griffin, the Jets tight end that was released. He was signed by the Chicago Bears, so he's no longer available to pick up. Spoon, thank you for your time, your wisdom, your insight, as always. I'm going to let you get back to your day. Let's see. There is only one person in the lead at the Masters right now. When we started this, there was a 4-way tie for top.
Oh, is that right?
Now it's one. Are you a big Masters person, Spoon?
Not big, but I was, of course, have been curious about Tiger Woods. So I've been kind of tuning in and out on it. But other than that, no, I'm not a huge Masters person.
I didn't used to be a huge Masters person. And then in 2012, I believe it was, when Bubba Wallace hit that shot out of the woods and it curved, it was one of the most incredible things I think I've ever seen in sports. And I've been hooked ever since. And of course, it's always a good excuse to make pimento and cheese sandwiches, which I had to explain to someone here in Green Bay the other day. They thought I was making it up.
Is that right? Yeah. Well, I'm waiting for my azaleas to like even be defrosted. So, they're popping in Georgia, but mine are like covered, still almost covered in snow. So,
I was in Alabama this past week visiting family, and in Mobile is where I'm from, and it's called the Azalea City. It's just covered in azaleas, and right now they're all in bloom. The whole city is just pink and purple and white from all the azaleas. And I got on Twitter and I saw that it was snowing in Green Bay, which is snowing right now too.
I'm all fired up because my daylily started popping out of the ground. So,
just enough to be a tease.
And I planted my spinach this week. So everything is, it's been the most depressing 2 weeks that I can remember in a long time. The weather has just been god awful. So it can only go up from here.
Oh, goodness. Well, I hope they bloom soon. Maybe you can tune into the Masters on Sunday. I don't even think Woods is on the top 5 right now. I'm going to be flipping back and forth between the Masters, and I have my Dodgers shirt on because today's their opening day. I'm very excited to see Freddie Freeman in the lineup. Before we do sign off, Levi put in one last question, and I was going to let us address that real quick. Are the Packers in any contact with Will Fuller? From what you know, the price shouldn't be too high.
I don't know specifically. I know I tried to make contact with his agent, but didn't have any luck. He's an injured guy. He's a guy who's missed a lot of games.
Like 2 games last year.
Yeah, and I think he missed a bunch of games the year before and the year before that.
2 years ago, he only played 7, so he missed 9.
Yeah, so I think that's the kind of guy you sign in training camp or right before the start of training camp. No sense in overpaying for a guy like that. And so, yeah, that's something you could see maybe later on if they still need somebody. But they're going to have to add someone. I mean, a couple of years ago they added Devin Funchess really late.
What a fun name.
Yeah, and he was not very good. Uh, they'll add someone. I think they'll add someone before the draft. I don't know if it'll probably have to be in a trade, but maybe the other possibility is that because there's so many receivers in the draft, that you'll see some guys getting cut after the draft because teams will find the young wide receiver they want and say, all right, let's for salary cap, let's just cut bait with this veteran receiver. So we'll look that free agency part of the game will be extend, past the draft.
Mm-hmm. And that being said, the first day of their off season is April 18th, but OTA workouts don't start until May 23rd.
Coming up, yeah, and Aaron Rodgers won't be there. So big off season for Jordan Love.
Yeah, well, yet again, can't wait to see. Spoon, thanks again. We'll let you get back to your Friday. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.